share the slides and we can get going. Thanks for joining us today, everyone. We're going to try something a little different today. I do these once a month. We're always trying to find new ways that we can help you out. Look at that, get more customers. How can we help you get more customers? Let's see that first slide also. I want to start with a story so we can kind of pull you in and get an idea what we're doing here. This is the company, The Art of Shaving. I interviewed the co-founder, Eric Malka, on the How I Made It in Marketing podcast. You might have heard of this brand before, but he was telling me, look where he started out. He had $100 in his pocket. He sold his car for $12,000 to start the business, right? Where did he end up? Show us the next slide, Austin. Where did he end up from there? $100 in his pocket, $12,000 to start the business. He sold his company to Gillette, part of Procter and Gamble. Didn't tell me the exact number. Told me it was 8 figures, almost 9 figures. You can do the math. That's like 80 or $90 million, right? And I don't open this webinar to do the thing I see. Man, sometimes I go to some events and I see, I'm just going to say these jerks on stage, right? And they're like, Mark Zuckerberg dropped out of college and he's a billionaire. Like, what's the lesson from that? I drop out of college and I'm going to be a billionaire? No, of course not, right? So don't say it for this. Obviously, I'm not going to make the promise you're going to sell your business for 8 or 9 figures after this webinar, but I say it for this reason, because you might be at a place where you're just starting out, you're struggling, you're trying to figure things out, things are tough financially, and you are trying to improve. And that's the same thing he was trying to do. Let's take a look at the next slide and see how he did it. That's what we're going to unpack today. How a guy like Eric did it, right? And we didn't work with him, right? We just have this fundamental methodology that we're going to talk about with a bunch of examples like this, how a guy like Eric did it and how you can, I won't say do it too, but I will say take wherever you are today and improve yourself, your company by 2%, 5%, 10%. That would be a pretty big win, right? Because honestly, look, you know, the odds of you selling your company for 9 figures to Procter & Gamble, it's small. But the odds of you building it into a sustainable company that you enjoy in your life, have a good lifestyle, and can make profitable, that's something hopefully we can get you a little closer to. So for Eric, he created a transformative conversion experience for his customers. You might not even know what the word conversion means outside of religion. That's fine. We're going to tell you that, right? You don't need to know this terminology, but you just need to know right now he created a transformative conversion experience. He took shaving as something that had been viewed as a chore and he turned it into a luxury experience. I hate shaving, right? That's one of the worst chores. If he could do that for shaving, maybe you could do that for whatever industry you're in. Now, listening to me, you might think, why should I listen to this guy? Which is why we have the next slide. Look, it's not about what I've done. I'm a reporter for Marketing Sherpa. I've interviewed hundreds, thousands of marketers like Eric, like I mentioned on the How I Made It in Marketing podcast, with the Marketing Sherpa case studies. We bring out that to you every month with SCORE, bringing specific examples to help you out. And if you look at the next slide, the company I work for, it's called McCraw AI. It's got a patented methodology, 10,000 marketing experiments, all of these different methodologies, and we bring that to bear to help you just get a little better with your marketing. And that's what I normally do every month. But today, this week, it's something special because I got a very, very special guest. He's someone that I've worked with for years. And so I know he's got this unique combination of direct hands-on business experience, but then he's probably one of the few people in the world that have this. He went deep academically to understand conversion and some of these other things academically. And so we've got for you today, we've got this very high level so you can understand and hopefully a transformative experience for you. So you look at your business and your job and everything in a new light, but we're also going to ground it with very, very specific examples and very, very specific tactics you can use so you get off the call with something to do. And before I turn over to Austin, the last thing I want to mention is me and Austin and you and Sean, we're all in the same place at the same time right now. It's a very rare gift we have. I know you just watch a lot of, just remind yourself, this is not a replay you're watching. You're not watching video. You can engage with it. Use the chat, use the Q&A, whatever we're teaching you, share your experiences, what worked for you, ask your questions. We don't want you to leave today without getting something helpful. So I encourage you, hit that chat and Q&A hard, and we'll help you as much as we can. We got some slides, but really we're here to answer questions for you. So Austin, thank you for agreeing to join me for the SCORE webinar. Like I said, do it every month. It's a special treat that you're on it with me today. Give a little bit about your background so people know who we're talking to.
Yeah, Dan, thank you for that. I just love your intros, man. That was great. I'm pumped up for this webinar myself. This is exciting. As Dan was saying, well, first off, Dan, thanks for inviting me on this. It's such an honor to get to work with you on this. It's been fun. My background, over 16 years of experience in digital marketing, strategy, conversion rate optimization. Many of those years were spent working directly with Dan. I've helped lots of different organizations, big ones, small ones, for-profit, nonprofit, B2C, B2B, the whole gamut. And my passion is really trying to understand how do we create these transformational experiences that really impact customers. And so that's what we're going to look at today. I've spent time helping marketers all over the world. As Dan was mentioned, most recently, I just got done spending 4 years doing research, in-depth research on this experience we call conversion. I got into that word and that idea because of the space known as conversion rate optimization. I'm not sure how often you've heard that, or even if you've heard it before. I personally kind of fell into this space, and this is part of my history with Dan. My background was first and foremost in design and multimedia production, and I joined this organization called McLabs, and it's one of the first laboratories on the internet that was taking web pages and running experiments to see what worked and what didn't work. And you don't have to know all this background, but just basically right now, if you go to any web page, any particular major brand web page, it's likely that company is testing the messaging on that page, testing the images, testing the language on that to see, hey, if we change this image to do this, will it get more people to convert? If we rearrange the information, will it get more people to convert? If we change this one word in the CTA, is it going to get more people to click that CTA? That's what conversion rate optimization is. Again, like I said, I've stumbled into it, but really fell in love with it because what it reveals as you start seeing these experiments, you start seeing what works and what doesn't, it begins to reveal patterns in kind of psychological patterns in terms of what motivates someone to say yes to one thing over another. But I was really struck by this word conversion. And because I've heard it in the business context, but I've also heard it in like this religious context as well. And so I was really, interested in, is there anything that we can learn on the business side from the religious experience? Are these the same thing? Are these different things? So I did the only thing, I could do in that situation. I moved my whole family. I've got 6 kids, and we moved from Jacksonville, Florida, and lived 4 years in England. And I spent those years interacting with some of the top scholars in the field of conversion. Not conversion from a business standpoint, but conversion from a religious standpoint. I was particularly interested in what kind of like emotional dynamics are involved in conversion. And what I studied is I studied a period of time during the 18th century known as the First Great Awakening. It's one of the first kind of religious movements over the last 500 years where people were having these conversion experiences in which they were documenting them. They were writing them. Hundreds, if not thousands, of conversion narratives emerged from this period. And so my research, I won't go too much into it. I wrote 80,000 words on it. It's very nerdy. But my research was really trying to understand what are the dynamics at play in these religious experiences. And as Dan and I were sharing some waffles the other day over breakfast at a fine establishment known as Waffle House here in the Southeast, he asked me, he said, what can religious conversion experiences teach us about getting more customers? Austin, in those 4 years that you lived there, is there any insight that you gained about what it might mean to create not just a religious transformative experience, but a customer transformative experience? And so that's what we're going to look at today. It's a little bit of a different angle. I've done a lot of these webinars. I've helped businesses, modify their website, optimize their website to get results. Never before have I taken the insights from this field and begin to apply them to business. So we'll see how it goes. I certainly agree with Dan. As we go through this, ask questions. We're glad to dig into this at any level. And Dan's going to help me here to make sure that we don't stay too theoretical, that we bring this down to the ground and have actual real world examples. So to answer this question, we need to start by understanding what we mean by this word conversion. Again, it gets used often. Maybe you don't use it, but if you go to any Fortune 500 organization right now, you go to a marketing department, you're going to interact with leaders who are saying, hey, how can we convert more customers? And so what do we mean when we say that a customer converted, or we converted a customer? I think to really get to, the insights here, we need to look at that word. And there's really 2 kinds of ways that you might use this, at least 2 ways that you might use this term conversion. And the first is you could use it kind of more of a transactional, external kind of way. Something has undergone a outward physical or material change. We could say, oh, like for instance, like ice was converted to water or water to ice. There's just a kind of a physical material change that's happening. Or you could think about it in terms of currency. We've converted dollars to pounds or pounds to dollars. And there's this kind of superficial understanding of conversion. And to be fair, when I talk with a lot of marketers, oftentimes that's the level at which conversion is talked about. We're looking at our data and we've seen how many people have visited our website, and we go, okay, well, of those people that visited, 297 became converted, became customers. And it can be just viewed at that kind of more outward behavioral change. That's not uncommon. And I'm not saying also that's a bad thing. I'm just saying this is one layer to look at it. Oftentimes, as talking to Dan, oftentimes on these webinars, and there's things you can do, small things you can do that you can get incremental behavioral changes. In fact, on most of our websites, there's not been a small business website that I've reviewed and looked at where I haven't seen opportunities like this to make modifications to improve the experience and ultimately get people to buy. For instance, this is an example of a classified ads website where they simply they went from 3 options to publish particular ad to 5. They just added a couple more options, minor tweak, minor change. And yet they saw 22% more republications. They saw 13% more revenue. It was impactful. This is good.
Yeah. So, and this was from a marketing Sherpa case study we wrote, and you can see that there's a source link at the bottom of all the slides. So if you want to go deeper into any of the articles, you can. I'll be sharing it on LinkedIn right after this. It's the quickest way I found to give it to someone. But the reason why, so one, we want to show this example so you understand what we mean by a transactional conversion. This is, this was very helpful for this classified ad website. Who wouldn't want to get 13% more revenue by making such a small change? I've taught those before in SCORE. You can use those. But the reason we want to go a little deeper today is because, we also teach to very big companies. And one of the complaints that marketers in those big companies tell us, and people working in big companies, is we can only do these transactional changes. Yes, we'll get more revenue, but we can't make those kind of bigger changes that are so impactful because the company's so big. There's so many players. We don't have the authority. You got to get everyone on board. It takes 12 years to change everything. So with the SCORE webinar audience we have today, you small business folks, I know when you look at those big companies, those Fortune 500 companies, they might be some of your competitors. I've done webinars before about competition. You can look on jealously, right? Oh, they've got this big budget. They're spending $30 million on Meta, whatever it is. They got this big brand. They seem to have everything figured out. And yes, obviously, big companies do have some advantages over the small companies, but an advantage you have, right? If you're going to invest this deeply in your business with your time, with your energy, with your money, with everything, is you get to make a lot of decisions. You get to decide the trajectory of that business. And what we're going to teach you today is a way that you can change the trajectory of your business that some of those big companies, they really struggle with. So Austin, jump in and let's talk about that.
No, I think it's good, Dan, and feel free to keep doing that, jumping in. My question as I look at changes like this, right? You can add incentives. You can do short-term things that maybe get a bump in behavioral change, but is that really a conversion? If we're going to use that word in the business context, is that really a conversion? And that leads me to a second kind of view as it relates to conversion itself. I've thought a lot about this and I could geek out on this. I won't do that for you. But what I do find is I look at marketers and the way they talk about conversion. When I read business strategies and the way they talk about conversion, I've written about this in a article in this journal. But here's a quote from Benji Rebham, and I'll just do one. There's many, but he says conversion is nothing more than a transition from one state of being to another. Already, if you're familiar with philosophy, we're getting to this ontological level. There's something not just external, there's something inside that's changing. You can convert from one religion to another. You can convert from one career to another. You can convert from a cold call to a hot lead. You can convert to a lead to a sale, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. He says, although the most obvious examples of conversion may revolve around religion and politics, he makes the claim that it's no different in the world of business and online conversion. Now, I might argue there are some differences, but he's making a big claim here that there's actually something other than this surface level conversion that's at the heart of businesses. And that leads me kind of the second view of conversion, which is the one I really want to advocate for today, which is not just viewing conversion as transactional. Again, there are things you can do to impact behavior, modify incrementally, and even in a short-term basis. But conversion as transformational, we're talking about someone having a meaningful internal change, whether it's mental or emotional, that's usually in relationship to something else. So and in case of business, right? Like it's a relationship change with you or your product or your business. Examples of this might be, and maybe you can relate to this. Maybe there's a favorite book you had that you read, and you remember just the transformation, or a movie you watched, just how it impacted you, how it has shaped you. Maybe you watch it over and over again. Falling in love, romantic relationships often kind of have this transformational conversion. You really it changes you, changes your life. Significant lifestyle changes, very dramatic. Maybe you're heading one way and you realize, okay, I really need to change the direction of the way I'm living. And then religious experience themselves kind of fall in this category of conversion, not just as an external change, but actually changing a trajectory, as Dan mentioned earlier, actually impacting someone in such a way that they change. And here's the observation. And I'd be curious if, as you're thinking about your own business, in some of the businesses you've interacted with, where you may have seen this. But the businesses, having done this a while and have, Dan has interviewed thousands of organizations, the businesses that experience sustainable growth, not these kind of quick incremental gains, but sustainable long-term competitive advantage, sustainable growth, are those that actually seek to create this kind of meaningful long-term transformational relationships with their customer. They go after, when they use this term conversion, they don't mean it in just a superficial way. They mean it in terms of, no, we've had a meaningful impact. We have a substantive transformational impact on our customers. And we can go to big brands that have done this. We think about those companies that have created those kind of big changes, not only in individuals, but in a market. The classic example, obviously, is Apple. Maybe less relevant today. I know there would be some people that would argue for or against that. But man, I remember those days when every time Apple would release a product, people would just line up for days just to get first access to that. I mean, there's a real true conversion, transformational conversion in terms of the relationship that customers had. I've got 6 kids, and I will tell you right now that Lego is killing it in this. I mean, anytime they launch a new product, my kids are there. They're thinking about it. I'm not saying that's every kid, but there's also adults. I've got a neighbor who has an entire room of Legos still, a grown man. And so that's the kind of relationship we're talking about. I came back from living in England. I don't know how this happened, but I remember coming back from England and all of a sudden I was just seeing these Jeeps that were driving down the road. And I noticed that there was like just a line of rubber ducks on the Jeeps. And I kept seeing that. I kept thinking, I've seen the same Jeep over and over again. How is this possible? But then I realized, actually, no, wait, something has happened. There is a thing now where people put rubber ducks on their Jeeps, and there is a culture. And I have talked to people with Jeeps, and yes, like it's almost like a family. You get a Jeep, and all of a sudden you're getting these messages and texts and social media plugs saying, "Hey, welcome to the Jeep family." I mean, I can list a lot of brands here, but as Dan and I were talking about it, I mean, this isn't just big brands. You might even wonder who's JJ's Auto Care. And Dan, I'd love for you to share your story with that, because I think this represents the same kind of transformational conversion we're talking about.
Yeah, again, because we want to show these big brands because you're familiar with them, right? But I could also see, I could be on this webinar as a small business person and say, look, I'm not going to reinvent Apple, okay? They're $1 trillion company. Come on. It doesn't take that level. Yes, that's the big level. But let me tell you about one example. JJ's Auto Care is my mechanic. You hear how I said that? My mechanic. That's transformative. I bought a car recently, and I told all the dealers, like, hey, before I buy this car, my mechanic has to use it again, right? My mechanic, the way I worded it. And by the way, before I bought the car, they found a problem that cost $5,000 to fix. Fortunately, before I bought the car, and so they saved me that. And that's why they are my mechanic. But it's not just mechanic, it's barber, it's notary, it's whatever, right? When someone uses that word, they're my notary, they're my mechanic, they're my barber, they're my bank, they're my credit union, whatever it is, whatever service you do, that is a transformative experience you've created for them. So yes, when we talk about a company like Apple, they've just reinvented technology, phones, computers, and so many different levels, all of that. Like that's not where the bar is for you. You serve a customer so deeply with this transformative conversion experience we're going to show you. And then they will say, you are my blank. Then you know you've hit that bar and you've built a sustainable business. So that's why we want to add those on there as well. Of course, you know, the big businesses, you've heard of them. You don't need to do that. You can be just my whatever, my notary, my mechanic, my barber, whatever it's going to be. And Austin, if you could share the next slide, just show one small example. This is a case study we did. Just kept the slide very simple. It was a collaboration software called Shanty, right? Their marketing message before they had a much better known competitor, a much bigger competitor. And so their main marketing message was, we're less expensive. We're 50% less, right? And then they had this idea after talking to customers, right? When they were talking to them a lot, it wasn't just that they bought because it was cheaper. The customers were saying, well, you know, this is actually a better product experience. So they changed their marketing messaging to focus on some of that better product experience, and their sales grew 18%. And that's a key thing to remember. If you sell on price, yes, that's kind of like the transactional thing we talked about in the beginning. But how can you create that experience that is better for customers? That is the transformation. That is what Apple ultimately did a very long time ago when they were a small company. That's what JJ's Auto Care does for me. And that's what you can do by focusing on that experience. And again, when we talk about this, it doesn't have to be, in this case, the biggest collaboration software in the world that serves everyone. It's
Right.
finding that ideal customer, whatever that niche is, whether it's local, whether it's a specific target industry, and serving the heck out of them better than that bigger company can do. Back to
That's
you.
great. No, that's great, Dan. Thank you. And I would just, as we're going through this webinar, this material, maybe you could think about an organization that's had that kind of impact on you, like to Dan's point, what's that company that you're not going to go to anyone else because they have created a meaningful, transformative relationship for you. And oftentimes that is very, very local. And
I will
so
also mention too, we happen to have this conversation at Waffle House. We specifically ate at a Waffle House. I've only been there a few times in my life because this guy is crazy about Waffle House.
that's true.
I worked with him for years. We never, for whatever reason, we never had a chance to go to Waffle House. He was talking about Waffle Houses so much. When he came back from England, he's like, where are we going to have breakfast? I'm like, it's got to be Waffle House. I got to have this experience with you. If you've been to Waffle House, it's a pretty simple diner, right? Obviously, it's a huge company now.
Come on, Dan,
Pretty
watch it
simple
now.
diner.
Watch it, Dan.
No, but it's like, if a simple diner can do that, I know you can as well.
No, it's true. It's true. And there's a huge story there, but no, thanks. They have, you're right. So like yeah, that's exactly right. So I would, what's your Waffle House? What's your, JJ's automotive in your life? Because that you start thinking about that and you start breaking down your experience. I think you'll see the stages that we're talking to today and how maybe it played out in your life. And then that becomes a map and a grid for you thinking through, okay, how can I do this in my own business? How can I create those kind of long-term meaningful relationships that people have to want to desire to come back to me? So a lot of things we could do today. What I'm going to do is take 4 key stages of the religious conversion experience. I know a little bit strange, but we're going to do this because those are transformative experiences. And we're going to look at 4 key stages that I think might be insightful for businesses. Dan, Dan's going to bring in these really great examples to help us tie it to the ground. I want to provide you a lens through which to view creating these transformative experiences. Some of this stuff you will know. Hopefully, some of this stuff will be interesting and things you might worth trying. There'll be kind of framework, examples, and then application. That's how we're going to move through this. So to do it, though, I'm going to use a framework coined by a guy named Louis Rambo. He is a psychologist. He studied religious conversions in the late 20th century. It was in the turn of the 20th century that people began to study religious conversion experiences. Psychologists, sociologists, anthropologists, and for about 100 years, people were just all over the map. They would study it and they would discover this. They would discover it. They study it. They discover this, and there was people were talking all around each other. The brilliant thing that Louis Rambo did is he read all that literature. He got all the insights and he kind of put it together in a single framework. And just to save you time, if you dive into the world of religious conversion experiences, this is the kind of the standard framework that often gets used as kind of a starting point for conversion. So it's a well-tested method, each of these steps. I might argue over some of the naming and, all the pieces. It might be 8 steps versus, 7 steps, 6 steps versus 7 steps, but these are good categories. And what I want to do is look at 4 of them today, because I think they're going to be most insightful for thinking about how to create these impactful experiences. To do that, though, I am also going to use a personal example of someone who's had an impactful transformation, a conversion experience. This is one of the most famous conversion experiences over the last 500 years. You may not know who it is, but it's a guy named Louis Rambo. And he is he's very famous in kind of literary studies, historical studies. He was an abolitionist in the 18th century, a pioneer of slave literature, one of the most thorough. He offers one of the most thorough accounts of the transatlantic slavery. He became partnered with people like William Wilberforce, towards the British abolition movement. Very, very impactful. But one of the things he did is he wrote what he calls his interesting narrative. And it's the story of his life. And it's a story of conversion. It's a story of transformation. It was a bestseller in his day, and it really impacted a lot of the things that happened in England at that time. So I want to tell you his story as kind of a model. I could have picked hundreds of others to do here, but this is, again, this is more to show you a model and to give you kind of a metaphor for thinking about your customer. So I'm going to use him, Equiano, as kind of a model as we go through these stages. Again, feel free to jump in. And Marjorie, thank you so much for that. I just saw Marjorie just said she loves Waffle House. I totally agree. If we had more time, we could spend some time talking about it. But if you haven't gone to one, you should. Dan had a conversion. I'm kidding. Anyway, let's get into this. So stage 1, context. This is foundational. And a lot of times when we think about transformational conversions in a religious context or in a business context, we want to go straight to the moment. When is that moment that, someone makes a decision or they have that transformation, that aha moment? But the reality is conversion starts way before then. And it's grounded in a context, things like social, cultural, religious, psychological environment. This is something that as you study conversion narratives, you'll see this. It impacts what happens down the line, family background, cultural norms. This stage shapes how open or resistant a person is. And so in the example of Equiano, he has a dramatic context. He was born and raised in Northern Africa. He was a part of a kind of a royal family within his tribe. He was a prince. Great family relationships, loved his community. And then one day he was tricked, thought he was going on a kind of exploratory adventure, but he was tricked into captivity. He was captured into slavery, and he spent most of his adolescence, he spent most of his younger adult years enslaved, and particularly enslaved traveling the oceans, often facing many life-threatening situations. He worked for many years. He was hard. He was very diligent. He gained favor with key individuals and was ultimately able to secure his own freedom. He purchased his own freedom and moved to England. So this is his context. I could say a lot more. This is, 5 bullet points on a very complex context in life, and our customers' lives are very complex, and their contexts are very complex. But I want you to note this, because this will come out. 2 things really of his context, and we'll see this emerge in his narrative. His love for community is a key aspect of his context, as well as his just experiencing a lot of life-threatening situations. And so what I want you to see, though, is context. And this leads me to the business insights. I want to talk about how does this apply to business. Context in any of these transformational, meaningful experiences is not just the first stage. It certainly is there. It's foundational. But it is the stage that interacts with every other stage along the way. It is central, if anything. A person's context shapes, ultimately determines their ability and their willingness to have a transformational conversion. I'd say it this way, and here's for business. So let's talk about business, and we'll look at some examples. So all transformational conversions are grounded in the experiences that your prospect has long before they arrive at your website. And so it's absolutely crucial if we want to facilitate these. We want to create space for these kind of experiences. That ability is directly connected to our ability to understand and empathize with the complexities of our customers' personal journey and where they are along the way. The most fundamental thing that you can do as a business leader, whether you're a very large business or you're just starting out in your small business, is understand your customer. The more you can understand them, the more you can empathize with them, the more you can get a sense of their context, the more you're going to be able to speak to them, relate to them, put the most relevant offers in front of them, understand the challenges they're having, et cetera. And so this is foundational. We had to start here. Dan, you want to walk us through, well, first we'll talk about art of shaving, but then walk us through some case studies illustrating this.
Yeah, so here's another one. With the art of shaving, we want to take it step by step through each of these stages so you can see from the beginning example how we'll look for it in one company. We're also going to show you other case studies as well so we can mix up the industries about each individual stage. So for the context for art of shaving, in this case, they had a brick and mortar store, right? Everything moves to digital. They actually had a brick and mortar store. And the key thing they said, they had this advantage since they were a small company and didn't have many customers, that they were actually working the front desk. And people would come in and they would ask questions and they would listen, right? So, they would come in and they would say, here's what they liked, here's what they disliked, they said the third thing, here's how we should run our business, that part they didn't listen to. But think about that. If you have any customer interactions, whether that's in a brick and mortar store or other things, that is essentially your lab. That is your chance to really understand the context of the customer. Here's another example. This was with a HealthSpire. This is a bigger company. This was part of Aetna, right? And this was, they're essentially brokers. They sell Medicare insurance. They work with Aetna. And the original landing page you're seeing here, it was a short page. There was a call to action at the top. It focused on what HealthSpire does. They're what we call the primary value proposition, them selling Medicare. Come here and buy Medicare, right? And it makes sense. A lot of people say, hey, do a short page. No one wants to read a long page. But here's what we changed it to. This is actually McCraw was testing with them. We changed it to a longer page, right? And you're like, what? Nobody wants to read a longer page. Well, here's what the page did. It recognized that when someone was coming to this page, they weren't actually thinking, hey, I'm going to buy Medicare right away. Not really. What they were thinking is, hey, Medicare is a pretty complex decision, and I need to know who I should talk to understand my options for Medicare. And so that's what they sold. They didn't sell what we would call the primary value proposition, the company selling Medicare. They sold what we would call the process level value proposition, doing a process. The decision was, who should I call to talk to about Medicare? And so you can see one example they did here. They had a Q&A with one of their tele-agents, right? The person you would talk to on the phone. And everything on the page, or at least 80% of it, was about this phone call and selling the value proposition of this phone call. Can you go to the next slide, Austin? And then the result of this is 638 more conversions. Wow, that's a lot more conversions. And I think this is a great example. We have a question here, Austin. I'll ask your opinion as well. It's from Gabriella. She said, I deal with scientific labs, so pondering how I can create a Waffle House experience to convert them to raving fans while doing audits. Thoughts on creating community with other businesses that serve the same customers. So I'll give you two ideas, and also might have an idea too. So when it relates to the context, I think this is a great example of what we're looking at, Gabriella. So I don't know that audience enough to know exactly what their decision-making process is. But you need to understand an audience, because when they're looking for a lab to do auditing with, right, they're probably not instantly looking to buy that service. Probably like with Medicare here, they're in some intermediate step where they need to decide who to talk to or what RFP to do, or making sure whatever like scientific certifications are had, or maybe they don't even know what to ask. So what they're probably looking for at first is to have a trusting conversation, a trusting visit, something along those lines. So if I don't know your strategy, but a lot of companies, probably the strategy is selling, buy our scientific lab services. But if you shifted that to serve these people better than anyone else could, to say, hey, here's how we help you make the decision of what audits you need or whatever that thing is, that's how you create a raving fan. I'll give you one other quick example. When you mentioned about creating community, and I'll share this case study in the chat. I did an interview. We used to do these big marketing Sherpa summits in Las Vegas from the stage, 1,000 people would attend. And we do interviews with different marketing leaders who are doing customer first marketing. And there was a construction software company. So again, Waffle House, that's fun, it's waffles. Construction software, I don't know if I should use the term boring, but it's probably at the same level of scientific labs, right? What they did, they sold construction software like project management, but they asked their core customers, what is your biggest problem? And their biggest problem was recruiting people to work in the industry. So what this construction software company did is they built a community. It was called I Build America. And the whole point of the community was to bring in people to work in construction. This is not what they sold. They sold construction software, but they built this community because this was the problem their customers have. And what happened? They're a small construction software company. And the CMO told me, we got into all these sales conversations against much bigger competitors that we probably shouldn't have been in and could never have gotten in. But because we built this community, right? And our industry saw we were serving them, they got interested in us and they wanted to talk to us. So those are kind of just two quick ideas for you, Gabriella, and Austin, you might have some other ideas too.
No, I can think of lots of examples where, on the surface, the industry would seem quite boring is not the right word, but it wouldn't be as exciting. We're not talking about Legos or like it's so the one I like when I used to teach value proposition a lot to organizations. I would come in, and the example I loved using was this organization that basically offered content for the oil and gas industry. I mean, they events, and if you're in that industry, that's probably exciting. I don't know, but to me, that just felt, like, okay, well, how do you create a transformative value proposition in that industry? And I'm here to tell you it's possible. And I really think this step is key. And Dan's kind of, illustrating this. The more you understand them, the more you can create an experience that directly addresses the things that they're facing. We could get tactically in your organization about, like for you, it's probably in the relationships and the interaction. Like audits is, pretty maybe transactional, but who's doing them and that interaction? All those things can be curated or optimized in such a way to make them meaningful that people won't want to go anywhere else. We can talk about that, but I do think the next point, Gabriella, about the crisis stage, I think is going to be particularly useful for that question. In terms of the context, just application wise, like what do I do with this? How do I get a better understanding of the context of my customer? There's several things you can do here. We're gonna, you'll get you'll get a recording of this presentation. You can go through this. It's kind of almost like a checklist that you could think through and see if you've done this. But first off, customer journey mapping, just understanding as much as possible where your customer has, how many steps, how many phases have they gone through before they even get to your ad or to your website or to your phone call. You can interview customers to try to capture some of that. And I always find it helpful to personify these customers. You may have 3 or 4 different prospect types, but really understanding who they are is very helpful. The most important thing you can do is actually talk to your customers. I had a friend just recently, small business startup, and he's, I think, halfway in. He's like 6 months in, and he's getting some momentum. But then he just had a rough month where he lost a lot of subscribers and was just kind of discouraged and really felt it as a loss. But what I told him is actually right now is a decent opportunity for you to go talk to those people that you lost and really find out why did they leave, and not a pressure way, but just really to understand, what was causing some of the motivations for why they left. And so, the most effective thing you can do here, however you do it, whether it's through surveys or through focus groups, talk to your customers and really try to listen well, so that you'll get so many insights from that. Let me go to the next stage because I'm looking at our time. I want to make sure we have time to go through all these things. The stage 2 is crisis. Now, this is an intense word. Don't let it create a crisis for you. But I would just say, like, the point of this stage is that there's oftentimes in these transformative conversion experiences, there is a disruptive event or period of time that really frustrates an individual, or it's a challenge. It creates problems, it creates pain. Obviously, it can vary in degree, and the impetuses can be different for this, but really this is the stage that creates an openness to your offer, or to what the experience, the conversion that they may have. And so, just again, to provide a kind of a personal example of this, just kind of illustrate this stage. In Equiano's life, he had just gained his freedom and he was living in England. And so you'd think he would be happy, he would be excited, but he wasn't. There was still things missing in his life. Obviously, the trauma of his context and what he had gone through. He really missed the community component of his life, and he really struggled to find it. If you read his narrative, he says things like this, and this is really his crisis stage. I was much dejected. I didn't know where to seek relief. I visited all these different churches, but I always came away dissatisfied. It wasn't what I was looking for. I couldn't find that community, and I became a burden to myself and viewed things around me as emptiness and vanity. And so he really kind of was in this state of like frustration and challenge. Now, you may not be serving a customer that's having that specific challenge, but I will say this: the organizations that create these long-term sustainable relationships with the customers are often tapping into some deep-seated frustration or pain or challenge in the life of the prospect. So in terms of insights for business, and I think this is, I was talking to Dan as we were going through this, and we kind of debated this step a bit. I really think this is important for you guys to get, to really spend time thinking about what you have an offer. And I go back to Gabriella's offer, this kind of audit stuff. Like, what's the problem? What's the pain of the prospect that potentially is going to be coming to your website or coming to you for your solution? A transformational conversion is usually grounded in a present or potential challenge or problem in the life of the prospect. Obviously, the degree of this is going to change based on how important the problem is or how urgent the problem is. The more it's felt, like the more the customer feels that problem brings that feeling or brings those things to your website, the less you have to do necessarily to help them understand that problem. But the less they feel it, the less they see it, the more you might actually have to help them feel this problem. And so I want to walk through just a couple examples of kind of what this might look like tactically in the business world.
Yeah, going back to our story with Eric Malka, I mean, as we said, he had the store, people walked in, people kept telling him, because they were working there. They were working the front desk. He said, do you have any products without fragrance? Every day people would come in, do you have any products for sensitive skin? So he's like, I didn't have to be a genius. I didn't have to be an MBA to know this. People keep asking for this. Let's try to make this product. Let's show another example there, Austin. This is actually a company, it repairs blown head gaskets. Basically, I'm not very mechanical, but your head gasket's blowing your engine. Apparently, sometimes you can pour this goop in and it will fix your engine. You don't have to do a major engine repair. So you can see, this is a test McCraw did with the company. You can see the headline there: repairs blown head gaskets in just 1 hour. We blocked out the name of the company. They want to be anonymous. But Austin, if you show the treatment, look at it's the same page, but I just called out what they added at the top. Does your car have a blown head gasket? Because I don't know. I wouldn't know what a blown head gasket is.
Right.
I don't know how many of you would know, but they're calling things out like white smoke coming from your car. Is there water in your car? Is whatever. Is your engine overheating? Right. So these are kind of indications. And what they were doing is they were helping customers understand you might have this crisis. And go to the next slide, Austin. We can see the results, right? 36% increase in purchases. So to Austin's point, sometimes, like I read a lot of articles for Marketing Sherpa, so I get these pitches. Sometimes these pitches I get, it almost seems like it's in the middle of the story, and they assume I know all these things about the story that I don't. I don't have this context. And that's what you got to remember for your customer. Where are they in the journey? Do you need to provide that context? And I've got this great question here from Darren, Austin. I'd be interested in your thoughts too.
Yeah.
How do you act on the reasons why a customer left, even though they might never return? So a few thoughts here. One, sometimes you don't. Sometimes you hear the reason they left and you have to understand that they were not the right customer for you, right? As we talk about figuring out who your customer is, you need to serve that right niche with that right value proposition. And when you see customers coming in that aren't right for you, that's okay. There are good reasons for customers to leave you. But the other thing you can do, obviously, is when you find out why they leave, this crisis that Austin was talking about, figure out why they came to you to begin with. What was their crisis? Yeah. One thing I like to do as a writer, listen to specific wording they use, because that's wording you can use in your marketing. Once you understand that crisis that they came in on, that can help you understand on your marketing, right, what to put in your page, your emails, whatever it is to communicate it. Then understand, and it's an honest and difficult question to ask, how did we fail you? You came in thinking this. How did we fail you? And that's where you get to the actual product improvements to create that transformative experience for them. What are your thoughts, Austin?
No, I think the answer is solid. I would just say one of the biggest challenges in this space is we tend to, when we're thinking about our products, we're thinking about our offers, we're often thinking about it from our perspective and our problems. We may not actually fully feel the problem that the prospect brings to our site. So, I mean, to listen to your customers, especially ones that have left. Like, I don't know if there's a more valuable voice to hear. I mean, you just get, to Dan's point, you just get so much intel. Doesn't mean you have to adjust your product to serve every problem. I get that. But you also may have some, it might just be a check for you as a bit. We may be excited about the wrong thing. This happens all the time, where we're really excited about this aspect of our product. And as we listen to customers and realize, wait a minute, that's not as important as this aspect of our product. And so maybe we should be talking more about this. Maybe we should go emphasize this. There's a lot more I could say there, but I think the check on our own self-blindness at times can be very helpful in those conversations. It's good. Great question. So there's a lot more that can be said here about the problem, but I would say at the beginning, just if you don't know the problem that your offer is solving, go do that. Figure it out. Talk to your customers. Understand why is it that they're coming to your site? What are they searching for? What are they looking for? That's what, if you're talking to them, that's one of the key questions to ask. In fact, I think Ashley suggests that in the chat. I think it's a good one. I love the idea of just simply asking customers, what is your biggest problem? What a great question. I think that would be good. Now, we can't stay there, and I will talk about that in the next step, but understanding what their challenge is, obviously through talking with them, questionnaires, you can even get a sense of the urgency. And you want to be careful about this, something I thought a lot about during my PhD, but want to, being able to kind of connect to the urgency with our messaging, share testimonials, illustrating the solution and the problem. These are all things you can do. Again, you'll have this slide. You can look at it and use it as kind of a checklist for yourself. I'm going to keep going because I'm looking at the time. The clock is just going away, and we've got 2 more stages to go through. And so keep sending your questions, Dan. Keep jumping in if you see one that worth addressing as we go. We'll try to save some time at the end for additional questions if need be. So stage 4. This is the third stage we're looking at together, but it's stage 4 in the model. So we're jumping past the quest stage. We're going to what's known as the encounter, and this is really the first point of contact that a customer has with you. It could be on your website. It could be in an ad that you're doing. It could be in some sense even word of mouth through someone else. And so in a religious conversion, context is often an initial interaction with the community, with a particular individual, but it's really a turning point. This is where the customer, it's not necessarily the conversion moment that often gets thought of as conversion, but it is a moment that the customer kind of changes their posture and really starts turning towards you and looking at you as a solution. For Equiano, again, like I said before, his crisis was just, he was in the state of just feeling lonely, couldn't find a good community. But then one day he ran into this gentleman who invited him to this group of people who were meeting in a home, and they were doing this. It was kind of it was a feast they were having, like a celebration they were having. They were eating food together, and it was social. They prayed together. They read religious texts together, and so he went to this. He didn't really quite know what it was, and he showed up. And for him, it was this encounter was life-changing. It's what really kind of turned him. This is how he described it. He said, I was so amazed as not what to even think of the company. My heart was attracted. My affections were enlarged. It's kind of some older language here. I wished to be as happy as them. These were happy people. And I was persuaded in mind that they were different. Their language and their singing, it did harmonize. And I was entirely overcome. And I wished to live and die as thus. Very intense language. But this was his first encounter with this group. And for the first time in his life, he saw a community that he was like, this is what I'm looking for. This is what's been missing in his life. Now, again, that's religious experience. What does this mean for business? I just talked about crisis, but we also have to realize that actually transformational conversion is not ultimately motivated by a crisis. It comes out of crisis, but really people are moved by attraction, being attracted to something appealing, or philosophically, it's the category like beauty. Beauty is the ultimate force that will draw customers into these transformational conversion experiences. And I don't have time to go into it, but having read hundreds of narratives, you might think that some of these are motivated by fear, but I can just tell you, reading it over and over again, while there are some for sure, the vast majority describe the thing that ultimately motivated them as something that was attractive, something beautiful, something that they wanted that they didn't yet have. And so on the business side, even though our product is ultimately solving a challenge or a problem, it ultimately needs to be reframed as a unique, desirous opportunity. Our marketing must call people out of their current circumstances into a new and rewarding and exciting experience. And if you think about the big brands we talked about earlier, or that organization that has transformed you, you can think about maybe how they've done that. In terms of a couple examples, Dan, why don't you walk us through where you've seen this?
Yeah, and this I think applies to a lot of small businesses, right? It's not only the thing you buy, it's who you buy it from and why you buy it. That's part of the encounter. And for Eric and the small group at The Art of Shaving, they had that story of starting in their kitchen, and the people who bought from them, they loved that story, right? The press loved that story. That was part of the encounter. That was part of the experience. It wasn't just going to a big faceless, nameless store. It was, wow, I'm part of the journey with this store. Let's look at another example though. This one actually took place during COVID, just shortly after kind of the COVID lockdowns when things were opening back up. It was a company called Wood Spoon, and they, delivered food to, your home, and it was homemade food. That was a thing. So, they could have taken a negative approach. They could have said, oh, you're so busy, you have time constraints, you have cooking fatigue. They could have taken that negative approach. Instead, they chose a positive approach, connect with a healthy cooking of home without having to put in the work necessary to create it. And part of the encounter was, this was in New York City. But you can see that's a Subway ad. So people would step off the subway off a busy day at work. Things are a little, weird after COVID, just opening back up. And that was the encounter they had. Homemade food delivered, and that made the difference to them. So again, it doesn't always have to be this big grandiose thing. When you think about it, like your work, walk into the Vatican or some epic church, it's just making that encounter positive to them. For them, they grew to 15,000 users. So before we move on to the next step, Austin, this question is great because this is something that me and Austin debated when we were making
these. I saw the question. I thought maybe you would put it in there. Throw it in. Let's do it.
It was and by the name's A. Real McCraw. So I don't know if there's a relation back to the Scottish.
It's my mom. No,
McCraw. But A. Real McCraw says, at what angle do you look at crisis when your business is for fun, not solving a need? So Austin and I debated this. I'll give you an example. I'm sure Austin has his own. So one way to look at it is, marketing is about two things. It's about accentuating a positive or eliminating a negative. I think what you're talking a lot about is accentuating a positive. But once people have that goal, there is a bit of a crisis of how to get to that goal. And I'll give you a quick example. I mentioned earlier, we were looking to buy a car and how JJ saved me $5,000. Other thing, we'll embarrassingly say it was a luxury car. And so one of our crises was like, what is the best leather to get? And I feel so embarrassed to say that in a world where there are real crises and real problems. But look, we're going to invest a lot in a car. We wanted to get good leather that's soft, but it also lasts. Those are the two things, Napa leather, whatever, all different types of leather. And so that was a bit of, I hate to call it that, but that was the crisis we were facing, right? Even though it was all positive, all good, all fun, all wonderful. It's like, once we had that goal, once we as human beings have that goal, that crisis, how do we make sure we meet that goal? What are your thoughts, Alice? I know we debated this a lot.
I think it's a good point. And I think ultimately what, philosophically, again, I'll go there, Dan, you pull us back, but people are either in these experiences of conversion, two things are happening. People are moving away from something and people are moving towards something. And so there'll be some degree of moving away. It may be stronger for some industries than others, and there'll be some moving toward. What I'll say from having studied these experiences is that the force that is most impactful is the moving toward force. You can get some initial inertia from moving away, but the force that really keeps someone, sustains someone long-term is the moving towards. In terms of fun, I think that's great. I mean, you can lean into this. You're creating opportunities. You're inviting them into exciting things. You're going to, like, this encounter is going to be easier for you. But I will say, man, there's a real problem that you might be able to tap into as well. I don't know what kind of fun you're talking about, but let's just say just your average fun. our lives are just so busy all the time. We're going from one thing to another. We've got this event, we got this event, we got this pressure, this deadline. I mean, there's a real genuine just problem in most of our lives of just being really busy. And so again, you don't have to like beat that drum real hard, but just knowing that can help you in terms of when you begin to present the opportunity to the prospect in the way you do this. I think, Dan, when you and I were debating, we were thinking about Disney. Again, that's another big organization, but just like, what's the problem there? Well, it could be that we just need a break from life. We need to do something more refreshing and energizing. And so there's a problem in there. Again, it may be subtle. The opportunity may be easier. And so that's what I would say to Ariel. Great question, though. And you're thinking the right way.
And Gabrielle mentioned fascinating combo. You should have heard the hours we debated. How we went back and forth to get where we are. But I will mention we're almost at the top of the hour.
Yes.
If you have to drop, you have to drop. Fine. Me and Austin, we're going to go longer. We want to give you more value. We want to answer your questions. We want to get through. We want to give you some more information. If you have to drop, if you go to my LinkedIn, I'll post the slides right after. About a week after, you're going to get this replay from via email, so you can see all that too. But again, just want to let you know we're going to keep going. We're going to keep bringing the value. So Austin, let's see how we can land the encounter.
That's right. That's right. And here's some practical stuff here. Again, this will be in the recording. Feel free to pause here and think through this thing. I will say just one key, actually, I'll save it for the next stage. The next one and the final stage we'll be looking at today is what's called the interaction from Louis Rambo's model. And, this point is, the encounter isn't necessarily the conversion. It's the first, it's that thing that opens the prospect up and gets them potentially moving in a certain direction. What happens next is actually more important than the encounter. Encounter is very important, but the interaction that the customer, I'm going to use customer here, or the convert here, has with that business or with that community becomes essential. So they begin building, in Equiano's stage, he had that first encounter. He saw that meeting. He was astonished by it. It changed the way he perceived things. But then he began participating in religious services in that community. He began hanging out with them. He began to build friendships with them. He had lots of interactions and touch points with them. He began to study some of their religious texts. He asked a lot of questions. He was a question asker. So he had a lot of these touch points. And then there was a moment later which he kind of identifies as like his big transformational moment. It's the commitment stage, but he describes it as this. He said, "The Lord was pleased to break in upon my soul." That should be an S there. Soul with his bright beams of heavenly light, in an instant, as it were, removing the veil and letting light into a dark place. It was a beautiful way to phrase it, but that just speaks to the depth of which he was impacted. I mean, wouldn't it be great if our customers viewed us in some sense like this? Again, I'm not trying to create too much of a parallel between religious experience and business, but just to have that meaningful impact in someone's life would be awesome. He went on to do amazing things. He's one of the most celebrated abolitionists. So here's the transformation. He went from being a guy who was feeling dejected, alone, isolated, not like his life was worth anything, to having this experiencing, to going on writing one of the best-selling autobiographies of all time, exposing the horrors of slavery. He shared his own personal story to humanize enslaved Africans. He was huge in the abolition with William Wilberforce, gave lots of speeches, and today he's one of the most celebrated abolitionists in the world. And so this is the power of transformation. And in some sense, and this may be a little bit idealist, but if we could have an impact on our customer, that would be amazing. And so final bit here, and this is really the takeaway for this stage for businesses: transformational conversions do not usually happen in an instant. And I would say in a business context, your first purchase is usually not your transformational conversion. It's usually what happens after that, and the way the things are delivered, the interactions that you have with the customer after purchase is what motivates them to either share with other people or come again, become a lifelong raving fan of your organization. And so therefore, it means that every touch point with your customer is valuable. We're not just trying to get people to buy from us. We're trying to create an experience with every single point of contact that we have with our customer. And that's really the key for these long-term transformational conversions. Dan, you want to walk us through the art of shaving, how they did this? Dan, you're muted. Sorry, man. There you go.
Let's see. So, key thing, a point I wanted to make here is when we talk about the interaction, again, we can talk about this on a very grand scale. You walk into the Apple store, it's like a cathedral, all of that is great. But here are some things you can do as a small business owner. What Eric mentioned is, he always tried to lower his employees' anxiety because then their fund goes up almost immediately. And when the employees are enjoying themselves, they're serving their customers better, there's a better interaction, there's a better experience. So, if you are big enough now that you have employees, that's one thing to think about. How can you serve your customers? How can you serve them best? By serving your employees, those frontline employees. The other point, here's another example. It's a simple packaging example, because it's also, if you have more of a physical product, how people receive it. This was a very small company called Barely Art. They made the glue. They just had these tubs of glue. They saw special craft glue. They started out with digital ads. They were advertising agency before they launched their own product, so they knew how to do this stuff, but it just wasn't working out for them. What they did ultimately that worked out, they realized they needed some brand experience, they needed some exposure, kind of some reviews. So they went with micro influencers. They reached out to these people on Instagram and they just said, "We'll send you our product." That's it. What a great interaction, right? If you're even a micro influencer on Instagram, you're getting all these offers, all these different things, right? But someone just saying, "Here, you can just have it," right? And then when they received it, this was the important part. They made it this nice little package. You can see an image of the nice little package on there, right? So before they even used the glue, the interaction they had, this positive experience on Instagram, this positive experience with the package, then ultimately when they used the glue, more of these people were saying nice things about it. This company started from nothing. They grew to 30 units a month. And ultimately, by 2025, they were selling 15,000 units a month in 100 retail stores. And really, the idea there for you is thinking, how can I make it? Doesn't have to be, again, this grand, Apple Store interaction, but how can I just make it a little bit better of an interaction so it's a great customer experience?
That's great. That's good. In terms of this step, thinking about fostering interactions. So thinking about every, not just your website, but thinking about every channel in which your customer is interacting with you in, and making sure that those are top notch and valuable experiences. Thinking about creating, ongoing nurturing campaigns where you get opportunities to engage with your customer on not just a one-time basis, but a multiple basis. Again, these transformational conversions are not in an instant; they happen over time. And there's other ideas here. I would just say this. One of the things that I noticed, we don't have time to fit this into it, go into too deep here, but one of the things I noticed in these transformational conversions in the religious context is how important hearing testimonies from other people is. And I would just say, one of the most effective things to do in particularly for small businesses is to really turn your currently satisfied customers into advocates for you, and to allow that to become multi-touch points in the community. And so finding ways to build that community of customers around you can be very, very strategic. I won't go through each of these bullet points. I know we're at time. And so let me just end with this summary. So again, trying to take something that's maybe not normally a business idea, but trying to learn from it, getting a new lens today, thinking about how do we create these meaningful transformative experiences from context. Transformational conversions are grounded in the experience your prospect already has before they meet you. You got to know that. You got to understand that. The more we can understand our customer, the better. Transformational conversions, and this is the crisis stage, are often born out of a specific problem or challenge. The more you can understand that and even frame your product around that, the better. But ultimately, that first encounter, the thing that will drive the customer, isn't necessarily leveraging a problem. It's going to be creating an appealing, exciting opportunity that's unique in the life of your customer. And then just remember, these conversions, they don't happen in an instant. They do happen over time via the collective force of many interactions. And so that's what we've walked through today. Dan, I'll hand it back to you. And I'm here to take questions.
We got a bunch of questions. Yeah, I want to go through some of these questions. Can you show them first, some of the resources they have? I just want to mention, market. We got a lot of free resources. We got an AI master class in 2 weeks. It does cost $1 to attend because we want committed people, but a lot of free resources there. Marketing Sherpa's got tons of free case studies, how I made it in marketing interviews.
Great case.
You show the next slide, Austin. If you guys want to reach out to us directly, we're here to help. So there's our contact info. But let's jump into a few questions. Gloria says, if you have a consulting business, do you have to identify what makes you a subject matter expert, or do you simply focus on what the customer needs and solving their problem? I'm just starting out, so I have academic knowledge, but not practical experience. So that's why I like how Austin broke this down. And there's other methodologies I can talk about too very briefly. But So when you talk about what makes you a subject matter expert, that is, at that crisis level, right? So the crisis, you're bringing people in, but ultimately there's that encounter and that interaction, and that is where they're going to want to know if you're a subject matter expert in some way. McLabs, we have a methodology, which Austin, by the way, is more expert in than I am. We call our value proposition methodology, and it's got four essential elements to it that kind of map what Austin talked about: appeal, exclusivity, credibility, and clarity. So yes, you want it to be appealing to them, right? But that credibility is ultimately going to matter as well. So Gloria, would the best thing I could, advice I can give you is watch Austin's webinar again, right? He's a guy who is an academic, but he showed how he took his academic experience and also combined it with business experience. And again, you just want to make that connection for them and also be honest with them. You can say, hey, I'm an academic, I have the experience on the business experience yet. So maybe, ultimately I may be charging more for this down the road, but right now you get in early and I'm only charging this and you get all that academic experience and I can still do this work for you. Did you have any thoughts on that, Austin? I know you're kind of closer to that than I am.
No, I just think so what's great about your academic experiences is going to bring some credibility. I mean, they're just consultants for days. And so you've got to have to find a way to create two things, something that distinguishes you from the other consultants, which academic experience can do that. But credibility also has to be there, as Dan was saying, as it relates to, have you actually done this before in a practical context? So, practically you might, yeah. So I would just focus on building. I think you've probably built maybe some of the exclusivity around your academic experience. I think you're now going to have to focus on building some credibility about why they should trust you to consult them rather than some of these other consultants that they can engage with. It's the challenge we all face. So you're asking the right questions.
We have a question from Letitia here that I cannot answer. The good
Oh boy.
bookkeeper, Letitia, the good bookkeeper. I like that, Letitia. Is there a resource that covers the rest of these stages of conversion? I know you mentioned Rambo, I think. And when Austin first told me, I was thinking of the 80s movie with Sylvester Stallone, but I think it's a different Rambo, right? Where can they go to see more about those other stages?
Yeah, there is. I'll see if I can find it real quick as we're wrapping up. But so Rambo wrote a book on all these stages, and I believe the book itself is called Understanding Religious Conversion. If you look up Louis Rambo, you can find his book Understanding Religious Conversion. It is not too technical. It's more of a psychological piece, and it's if you're interested in that stuff, you'll find it really valuable, and it does really summarize 100 years worth of studies and thinking about this. So if you're interested in that, you can go there. And then that's probably the best resource in terms of all the stages. ChatGPT is also very familiar with Rambo's work, so feel free to interrogate that as well. And you can ask him to kind of ask ChatGPT to maybe point you, tell me about this stage, and I found that some of that is actually very, very good and truly representative of the fuller work.
McLabs AI too. That would be another place you could go. One more question here from Sarah. How valuable is polling your targeted community on Reddit when people are anonymous? I'm wondering if this promotes honesty or if that platform will skew the results if people are anonymous. Example, over the top griping about something that you might not be able to fix. Thoughts? Well, I'll give you two real examples, Sarah, of how I've seen people use Reddit. Karen was asking what AI. That's McLabs AI. Actually, you can see right on my screen. That's where I work. McLabs AI, MECLABS AI.com. Thank you, Karen, for asking. So for Sarah, talking about Reddit, here are two examples that I've seen work really well with Reddit. I interviewed on how I made it marketing. And again, you guys can email me this. I'll send you the full interviews. You can hear more stuff. It was a chief commercial officer at Mint Mobile. This was shortly before they sold, it's the company with Ryan Reynolds. They sold for a lot of money. And one thing he told me is when they would do promotions, this is pretty big guy here. He would go on Reddit because he just wanted to watch the conversations and see what was going on about their promotions. And he would even hop in and help people. So one, it's just being there and being part of the conversation, right? As you know, with Reddit, it's not always about our company and the thing we want and the thing we want to learn. It's more about the general atmosphere and what's going on around your industry and what's going on around your product set and just kind of being part of that conversation. You're going to kind of see patterns over time. Yes, if it's one person that's really noisy and complaining, well, that there are always outliers and you don't want to optimize for them, but just be involved. And that can really help you learn. I even asked him, like, you're such a busy guy. How do you even have time for this? And he's like, you've got to make time. It's too valuable. But here's another one that I thought was really interesting. This was a small company. It was and what he did was he would do what you're talking about. He would poll about different problems he would think in the industry. But then he would do Reddit posts or Reddit content, and he would look and he would see which ones worked better than others, like which were getting more likes or shares or comments or whatever on Reddit. So he would take that initial information, like the griping that you talk about, and then he would say, like, all right, let me now go back to kind of Reddit community in a way to get some data and see which ones were really resonating with people and which were not. And that was kind of his test bed to see what would work. And by the way, Austin, Sarah mentions Mint Mobile is my Waffle House. So it's not only Waffle House. Did you have any thoughts on answering Sarah's question there, Austin?
I think you've answered it very well. I mean, ultimately, when you have these conversations, I mean, and anonymity, I can't say that. I never say that word. Anonymity, being
I mean,
anonymous can certainly open up people being more honest with you. It could also create space for more negativity. I think either way, when you're talking to your customers, the more you can create a safe space for them to be honest, the better, the more legitimate answers you're going to get. And so you can do that through an anonymous source like Reddit, or you can do it in conversations with your customer, just letting them know, hey, I'm not trying to, I'm like those, say those customers that have left, I'm not trying to get you to come back. Like, I just really want to understand, and let me, like, you can say whatever you want to. I really just want to hear and listen. And honestly, it'll help me the more honest you are with me. And so just kind of framing it around honesty, I think is going to give you the most insight.
all right. Well, just a reminder, if you want the slides, I'm going to be posting them on my LinkedIn in the next few minutes. You could see that right there on the screen. There's really not many Daniel Bursteins you could just search for, but I'll put it in the chat again. And in about a week, you'll get the replay. So then you can see all that stuff as well. So Austin, how do you think it went? We talked about this in a Waffle House, as we mentioned a few times now.
All good
It was
things
just
come
great
out
the
of Waffle
conversation.
House,
Asked them.
Dan. All good things come out of Waffle House. So, like, the fact that this was born in that conversation, I mean, it was already destined to be great. So, honestly, what made it great was just good audience, engaging, great questions today. So, thank you guys for tuning in, and Dan, thank you for the opportunity, man. This has been really fun. Enjoyed doing this with you.
Thanks, everyone.